Hello folks, Dr. Mike Breen here at healthytransformations.ca and the Healthy Transformations program. Just wanted to give you another little video posting or video blog about another concept that is really foundational to understanding the Healthy Transformations program and particularly how food can be the most powerful tool in restoring healthfulness in many people, yourselves perhaps, who are suffering from ill health and other kinds of problems. The principle is, how is it that inflammation is actually caused by sugar? Well, let's go back to a little bit of a drawing, a little bit of a graph here. What I'm going to draw is what we call a blood sugar curve, and what that is if a person was exposed to a single exposure of sugar, it could be a chocolate bar, it could be a can of pop, or something like that, and presuming that they hadn't had any sugar for a long period of time, or what we call a fasting blood glucose test. They're not done that much anymore, but they used to be quite popular. You'd get a curve that was like this. So blood sugars are on here, and this is time across the bottom. So the blood sugars, as a consequence of being exposed to a sugar dose here, would rise up like this, then they would come back down to a lower point. So pretty typical. These are kinds of curves that are in every single physiology textbook that every medical doctor, chiropractor, naturopath, osteopath, nurse has ever studied. How is it that the blood sugars go up? Well, that's just from the absorption of the materials. How is it that, in fact, it goes down? That's in response to insulin. So insulin would have a curve, and this is not exactly 100% accurate, but insulin would rise, and as the insulin rises, it actually initiates an effect. There's a bit of a time delay here, which would drive the blood sugar back down, and as the blood sugar goes down, then the insulin secretion from the pancreas goes down as well, and things go back to normal. Now, typically, this would take somewhere between 90 minutes perhaps, or 2 hours or something like that. And again, when we were looking at these things in our textbooks, we saw that this was normal function. And yet, just because the body can do that doesn't mean that it ought to do that. This is actually a very stressful thing for the body, as it turns out. Having blood sugars rise this rapidly, actually, and having insulin that is commensurate with that, actually drives what's called the acute inflammatory response. So when we eat foods and we drive insulin up, inflammatory influences take place. Now, the interesting thing is that the acute inflammatory response, and how would you know what that is? Well, if you've ever been bit by a bee, or you've got a sliver in your foot, or something like that, again, you get soreness and you get redness and you get swelling. That's an acute inflammatory response, but it happens in our body just the same as it happens outside of our body, and it happens in response to the consumption of food. The interesting point is this: the inflammatory response doesn't take 90 minutes to 2 hours to resolve. The inflammatory response goes up. An acute inflammatory response will last from 12 to 72 hours. So what's important about that is that each time we consume a sugar, we're going to produce an acute inflammatory response. If we only ever ate one chocolate bar or one pop and then we didn't do it for weeks or months on end, then it wouldn't be a big deal. But the majority of people don't do that. They're actually consuming sugars on such a regular basis that, in fact, we get a curve that looks more like this. The person wakes up, they have something that's sweet, they wait for a while, they have something else, some cereal, then they're having Timbits perhaps at work, and then they're having a big fat sandwich. And this is a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the message. What goes along with this are insulin responses that basically mimic the blood sugar levels, and then this is an acute inflammatory response followed by another, followed by another, followed by another, and people do this day after day and week after week, month after month. They do it throughout their lifetime. And as a consequence, you get an inflammatory effect that actually goes on for life. And that's what produces chronic disease, is that exact phenomenon. If you want to learn more about that, sign up for a workshop with the Healthy Transformations program, or get in contact with Christopher Lawrence or myself. We'd be happy to let you know more about it.